All right. So for the homework, you need this file here, I believe, and only this file, alucan.jpg, JPEG file. And it is referring to the last page in this document. Now, this is kind of the introduction to Project One. Like I said, Project One, you will all be designing a bottle. So the homework here is about designing a can, or not designing, tracing an aluminum can. And then on Wednesday, we'll talk about how to change the dimensions so that it can be a taller can, a wider can, and it rebuilds. So this demo, this homework is all just about literally tracing this. Again, it's like creating the bee, but something a little bit more advanced. It takes you through each step. A lot of them are repetitions. Through talking with Surin, I realized my layout is a little bit confusing. This down here refers to steps 4 and 5. And I believe down here when it says repeat step 2 in number 7 is basically just asking you to create a new sketch on the front plane. And don't worry, I'm about to go through all of these steps, so I'll talk about this as we go through it. When it asks you to create a new sketch on the front plane, it's not asking you to like rebuild this rectangle. It's just simply asking you to create a new SolidWorks sketch, which I'll get into. Okay, so to start the homework, you go to File, New. Again, if you don't see this, you might see something like this. So you want to click on Advanced. Under Template, you want to select Part W and click OK. Again, this is not the most critical thing. The reason I have this, I'm being repetitive now, it's just that it has better lighting. It will make your parts look better. That pop-up shouldn't appear for you. Okay, so the first thing it asks you to do is create a new sketch on the front plane. So this is something you should all be familiar with that last exercise we did. So you simply click on the front plane and you either navigate to the Sketch tab here and click on this, or you can hit Alt-S. So I'm going to click on this. It asks you to create a rectangle. Again, everything should be attached to the origin. If you're not attached to the origin, that's a problem. So this simply asks you to create a rectangle with attached to the top left corner of the top left corner being attached to the origin. It seems a little bit backwards, but you know, this class, of course, we talk about product design. So Project One, while it's mainly focused on an introduction to SolidWorks and mainly sketches, we touch on bottle design, which is a big, packaging design is a big industry. And there's actually a lot of jobs to be had in packaging design because it's one of the fastest moving product industries because there's just like high demand, a lot of things come in packages. So one of the things in the packaging industry is often the bottles are built from top down. There's a reason for that. I'm not going to get into it now, but that's why it's asking you to create this at the top here. The next thing it asks you to do is to now dimension this to the height of an aluminum can, which I had measured at 4.8 inches. So again, D for dimension, I click on the line, drag to the side and click. So I realize I go too fast sometimes. I'm going to slow this down a bit and start again. So it's asking you to dimension the height of this. You could either hit D if you have my hotkeys, or you can go up here and click on Smart Dimension. Click on this line. And again, once you click on the line, it started the dimension. You have to click again to complete the dimension. And again, wherever you drop this really does not matter. So I'm going to click here. And now it automatically asks me how tall I want this to be. So I'm going to type in 4.8. And I'm going to click on the checkbox, or you can hit Enter. And now this is 4.8 inches high. You now want to set the width of this to be half the width of the can because we're going to revolve it. So we're drawing only half the shape of the can. It makes our life a little bit easier. So again, you're still in the Dimension tool. It's still attached to the cursor. I'm going to click on this line here on the bottom, drag this down, click again, and again it asks me what size do I want this to be. Following the sheet, I'm going to make it 1.3 inches and click the checkbox. And that is the first sketch you have to make. Okay, everything should be black. That's important. To get out of this sketch, you want to go ahead and hit either this one here. Again, don't hit the X because the X will undo everything. So you either want to hit Alt-S or this icon here or this icon here. And now we are outside of the sketch. You can see the first part of our Jenga tower is starting to be built. It asks you now to create a new sketch. And this is where there was confusion a little bit, I think, based on my layout. So to create a new sketch, you simply select the front plane again. And again, you either hit Alt-S or you click this up here. And now you'll notice if you look on the left on the tree here, you should have sketch 2. So we now have a new sketch. Now we want to add a picture to trace the bottle. So this is a brand new feature for you all. If you installed my settings and layout, you should see a sketch picture option here. If for some reason you don't, and I know some of you like Rhino with this like search command tool, up here you can look for things. So you could type in sketch picture and it should pop up here and you can select that. Anyway, if you find it in one of those two places, you want to click on sketch picture. And here's where you want to find the aluminum can. So for me, it downloaded to the desktop. For some of you, it might go into your downloads folder. So I'm simply going to select aluminum can and click on open. The program's going to think a bit, and now we have this big picture in here. We brought it into SolidWorks. The reason we made this box first is that now we need to scale this can to be the right size. So you can simply scale, you can drag it by clicking on the photo and moving this around, or you can click on this corner and simply rescale it. And by using these two techniques, you want to move the can into the box. So the can is the same height as the box and roughly halfway in here, kind of like this. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not grading this to any nuanced degree. Now, once you have that, that's really all you need. If you want to be a little bit fancy, this is not in the sheet, so maybe pay attention for a minute. Sometimes when I work this way, the full image distracts me. So if you notice on the left here on the properties, at the very bottom there's transparency. If you select full image, you can set a number in here. You can drag this tool. So you can drag it to like 0.67, and now the can is like slightly transparent. It makes it a little bit less distracting. When you're happy with that, you can click the checkbox in the property menu here on the left. And that basically leaves the drawing where it is. And now you can exit the sketch. So now we have two sketches here. We have the first one we created, which is the rectangle. We have the next sketch we created, which is the can. So there is a quick question here about the blue line in the image. So if I go back and, so right now I'm out of sketch world. I know I'm out of sketch world because this icon is missing up here. So if I want to edit the can image to look at that, I can click on this, and I can either click on this sketch icon, I can right click and say edit, or I can just simply say Alt S once this is highlighted. Now, in order to move the image again, you have to double click on it. So if you're not happy where it ended up, you want to go back into editing the sketch and now double click on the image. And now you'll notice there's this line here, which I guess apparently now has turned black for me. It was blue before. This line, this weird big dotted line, I'll be perfectly honest with you all, I have no idea what it is. I don't deal with it. I don't bother with it. I believe it's like a quick way to rotate the image, or I don't know. I don't bother with it. So basically, if this line gets left above, doesn't get moved, don't worry about it. As far as I know, it doesn't do anything. Okay, so, but I'm glad you asked that because it was an opportunity to say it doesn't matter. But it's also an opportunity to say if you're not happy with your placement of the can, in order to edit it, you have to double click on here to move it around again. Oh, it turned blue again now for some reason. I hate to say it, SolidWorks does have bugs. Weird things will happen. It's a heavy program. It's not perfect. It's pretty good, but sometimes there are issues. Okay, so again, once you're happy, checkbox and exit the sketch. Okay, the next thing the sheet has you do, if you look at your tree here, we now want to trace this can. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This isn't quite halfway, but it doesn't have to be perfect. What it asks you to do is to take this sketch and reorganize it so that you can, if I go back to this first sketch, which is the rectangle, and if I go to edit it, you'll notice the can disappears. That's because the can is below the first sketch. So if I exit out of here, what you want to do is you want the sketch to happen after the can. So you can simply just click on this and drag it and hover over sketch 2. You should see like a little arrow and let go. And now you've reorganized the sketches. They reorganize themselves. So now when you go to edit this sketch, you now see the can in here. The reason we put the rectangle in first was to get the right size of the can. Once we have that, we can now come in here and trace the can. From this point on, it's basically using the skills that you just learned with the D and the B. So this is my advice to all of you, how I might start. is I might select all of these three and yep, Armando got it, change it to for construction. Now you'll notice this is not a perfect image. It's a three-dimensional image of a can, so just do your best. But simply using lines, you know, and this is where you might, depending, everyone's different. Some people are a little more fussy than others. If you're fussy, that's a good thing to have. But for example, if you look at this little bump here, right, you can kind of recreate it like this. Again, this is kind of like the D we just created. So my advice to you would be to make these two items tangent to each other. It's going to make it work better. Probably not a bad idea to get a construction line in here that's vertical. These are all decisions I want you to make for yourself. But once you have that lip, you can bring this down here. This is vertical here. This gets a little bit muddy here, but to me, something like that would work. And finally, close it off. The last command, which is on, which I'm realizing now, I apologize, it's not on the sheet. Honestly, if you come in on Wednesday with this traced out, that's cool. I'll give you credit because it's not on the sheet. But ideally, what you do to end this is you go to Features, find Revolve, select that. And what Revolve is asking you to do is saying, hey, what do you want to revolve around? Simply just choose the line in the middle and click Check. And now we have a basic representation of an aluminum can. If you want to see where this is going for project one, you know that you will be successful, is if you go in here and edit this sketch. So we're getting a little bit advanced now here. Here's some new things, okay? So we just revolved the can. SolidWorks does something that when a new feature is added, you'll notice it's part of our tree now. The sketch to build it is now consumed by the feature. It's kind of like a file that's in here. If you click this little triangle here, the sketch will appear again. If you right click on this and click edit, if you change this number to like 2, you can see the can changes. So now in the true spirit of this, if you really want to do this properly, again, the trace is kind of the point for project one. On Wednesday, we're going to get, this is kind of a preview of where we're going. So what was this? This was 1.3. This is where it might be useful to, for example, dimension this and this, so that when the can grows wider, this proportion stays the same, right? You don't want the design of the can to change. You want this and this to stay the same. So now, and same thing down here, right? These are where dimensions come in handy. If I'm losing some of you at this point, don't worry. I'm kind of like starting to talk about what we're going to talk about next week. But it's just a long way to say that now if I change this number to 2, double click on it, click on 2, you'll notice that the proportion, the profile, and the edge stayed the same because I dimensioned it. Does that make sense to everybody? That's the goal for project one. Ultimately for project one, you're building 2 bottles, one that you pick yourself and one that you design yourself. And for each bottle, you need to create 3 sizes. So it might sound like a lot because on one level, you're building 6 models, but you're really only building 2. And if you build them smart, which I hope you do, and I hope you take some of this advice, by changing by setting it up in a way similar to what we just learned, you can change the width and the height of the bottle, and the design should stay the same overall. Any questions on any of that? All right. Yeah. I mean, again, the main goal of the homework is to have a trace a can. Again, as long as you have a can traced, I'll give you credit, but ideally you have a can revolved. And that will set us up in good shape for next Wednesday.